Hello, I'm State Representative Andrew Brenner from the 2nd House District. Welcome to Ohio in Focus.
Hello, and welcome to this edition of Ohio in Focus, a program that brings state government to you. I'm your host, Charles Willoughby. We have with us today State Representative Andrew Brenner, who serves the 2nd House District, which includes all of Delaware County. Thank you for joining us, Representative.
Thank you.
This is your first term in the Ohio House of Representatives, so why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background before you became a representative here?
Well, I'm native to Central Ohio. I grew up in Delaware County. Prior to becoming a state representative, I served as Delaware County Recorder. I was elected in 2004 and served through 2010. I've owned small businesses. I grew up on a small farm. I was very much involved in my wife's company, Prestige Music Studios. It's a music lessons company. And it's a small business. We have 17 employees, and we teach music lessons to students. I personally don't, but my wife's staff does. So.
Well, that's a great small business background. Was that the leading factor for your reason for running for office, or what inspired you the most to become a representative?
Probably about 20 years ago, when I was in student government at Ohio State, I really became involved in the background, and kind of Kasich actually was one of my inspirations. His standing up and finding, the $500 toilet seats and so forth, and wanting to go and fix government and do what we can to try to improve it. Government's not going to go away. And, I felt that I wanted to get involved and say, okay, let's make things run more efficiently. And even back then, I felt that way. So,
has your job as a state representative been what you expected it to be before you got here?
Yeah, pretty much. The job itself has been pretty much straightforward. When I was a county recorder, I was involved in the legislative arm of the Ohio Recorders Association. So for the 3 years prior to becoming state representative, I would come down to downtown Columbus about once a month and meet with legislators and get to learn the process a little bit. So it was a good learning experience. It was also a good experience to deal with county government and local government issues, and then try to deal with them at the state level. So it was a good kind of transition there.
Now, one of the major issues that's affecting our state in general is the economy and creating jobs. But what are some of the other major issues or concerns that your constituents have in your district?
Well, in Delaware County, which is what I represent, is actually, I think, the largest district in Ohio as far as the state house, because of all the major growth that we've seen. A lot of the small businesses are concerned about higher taxes. They're concerned about workers' comp. They're concerned about the expansion of government. They don't want to see that expansion. They want to have more control over their small businesses, which they are unable to do right now. I think that a lot of the reforms that we're trying to do here in the State House and the Ohio House, I think, will go to help those small businesses and help my constituents back in Delaware County. Another major issue is in my county is education, and I think that we want to make sure that we have the best schools, but we want to make sure that those costs are contained. And I think such things as Senate Bill 5 will definitely help Delaware County with the cost of local government, with the cost of the education, and keep those costs in line with the rest of the market. Now, a lot of people say, well, the teachers and a lot of the public employees, that they only do what can be done in the public sector and so forth. You can't compare them to the private sector. That may be partially true, but you do need to bring in some business practices into county government, into local government, into the schools, because if you don't, you're going to have continued runaway costs. I think a lot of the concerns that I have with a lot of the people in Delaware County are that they're afraid that their property taxes are going to go to the point where they just can't afford to live in their houses. And in fact, we are seeing that right now. So we need to do what we can down here at the State House to contain those costs And I think I'm working with my fellow legislators down here. I'm very excited about a lot of the reforms that we've been working on and want to continue working on those.
And I'm sure that your experience in the county level has helped with your decisions here in the State House, and also your experience in the Recorder's Office probably may have led to some of that growth in your district. What are some of the other initiatives that you've worked on here while you've been a representative that have had a good impact, or you are especially proud of or happy about?
Well, I'm actually, my first two bills that I've worked on recently, one has to deal with dyslexia, and I serve on the House Education Committee, and House Bill 96 deals with the dyslexia issue. And the Ohio Department of Education, while it's an administrative code, it is not in the revised code, and it's also part of the federal code. And we have a lot of students that are not getting the education they need. They can't learn to read, and by putting the definition in, by actually doing a pilot project versus just implementing it throughout all of the state at once, a pilot project, we get to work out the bugs first. That way we can keep the costs down with it, and we can use best practices in our schools versus just mandating it on them immediately. So I think that's something that will help out thousands of students throughout the state, because many of these students that have dyslexia, for instance, they go on, they can't learn to read, so by the time they're in the 5th grade, they need specialized education programs. Once they have those programs, the big problem becomes cost, because you have to have individual teachers help them out, whereas if you catch it early on in kindergarten, they'll be able to learn by the time that they're in the 2nd grade. So a little bit of common sense there. And then those students then don't go on to have problems down the road, maybe end up on Medicaid, and some of them may even end up in prison, which is a sad thing. So if we can catch those problems early on, that would be a very positive thing. Another bill that I just introduced, House Bill 242, that particular bill is a tax credit bill. And what it does is it gives out education scholarships to students to go to private schools. And that particular bill, I think, will help foster the private sector and get those students out of schools that are failing and there are problems. Give those parents another option. Those students can apply for these scholarships. And the great thing about this bill is it allows everything to happen in the private sector, so that you have a private sector companies that are pushing the scholarship programs, they're finding the students, and they're matching them up to the scholarships so that those students can go to these private schools. So that allows a little more competition, and it's something that's done in the private sector versus the public sector. So I think that's a very key, I believe, to school choice, which I think is definitely needed in the state of Ohio.
Now that is obviously complex, and it's got a lot of intricate parts working through it. So that is also in the committee process. Is that correct? It's in the Ways and Means Committee?
Correct.
Still working through the details of it?
Yes.
What other committees do you serve on? You mentioned you are on education and have worked on a couple issues there. What other committees are you on currently?
Well, I serve on Rules and Reference, so pretty much all the bills that go through the House of Representatives have to go through that committee. Very simple committee. We work through things really rapidly. Lou Blessing's a good chair there, very good chair. And I serve on local government, and I also serve on financial institutions, housing, and urban development. And in both of those cases, my local government background, I think, definitely goes to help with the issues that we have to deal with, dealing with local government, with townships, with counties, with municipalities, and all the various ramifications of just a small change in a law can impact those in ways of cost, in ways of problems that maybe we don't see. And so I think that my background, having also come from local government, helps on that committee. And what I didn't mention was I also had served and had owned a property development company at one point with my father. And I had also worked in the mortgage industry for about 11 years prior to becoming county recorder. So the Financial Institutions, Housing, and Urban Development Committee, my background, I can see a lot of the issues where people want to go in and they want to regulate. The problem is they want to go in and they regulate, they do it too much, or they do something that actually has a bad alternative ramification that impacts the housing industry. And we don't want to do that, especially given the fact that we have a high foreclosure rate in the state. We've had a lot of property development that has gone on that's come to a halt. Even in Delaware County, which was one of the fastest growing counties in the nation, and still is, we don't want to do things that will, harm that industry or harm any of the industries in Ohio. So I think that serving on those committees, I'm very happy on those committees. It's very fun, and the Education Committee, like I touched on, I serve on that. Those committee meetings are very long, but education is very important in the state. It's very important everywhere, and actually we need to do all we can to try to improve that. So I'm great committees. I'm glad to be on them.
Well, it's great that you enjoy it. You're supposed to have a little bit of fun here, even with all the issues that we're trying to tackle. So what's one of the most enjoyable parts about your job?
Meeting with constituents. I mean, really, even meeting with the constituents that don't agree with you, when you sit down with them, and sometimes you don't always agree with them, and they don't always agree with you. But in some cases, earlier this week, I had a lady call into our office. She was asking about the elections reform bill that we had recently passed and had some concerns, and I spoke to her, and she said, oh, well, that makes sense. And just meeting with the constituents, talking to them, and explaining how and why the bills are, and maybe even the way I voted the way I did on a bill. It may not be completely obvious, but working with constituents, I think that's probably one of the more enjoyable aspects of this job.
Are there any specific groups in your district of constituents or issues that you've worked on or that you are planning on working on for district-related issues?
Well, we've had a couple of issues. For instance, I'm also a member of the National Federation of Independent Business, and so small businesses, those issues, I think, trying to deal with some of theirs issues specifically related to taxes. Like I said, I think there's a lot of small businesses out there that feel overregulated. They feel like they're overburdened with regulations, and I think a lot of the reforms that we've done in the House and working with that constituent group, I think, will help to improve that situation. So I would love to continue working on those issues, and it's been very enjoyable.
Well, what would you say is the best way for your constituents to get in touch with you if you have more solutions or if they have more questions about you or about the process? Yes,
they can go, actually, I've got a Twitter account. I am on Facebook, so there's numerous ways they can contact me, as well as contacting the office directly by calling 614-644-6711, or sending me an email to district02@ohr.state.oh.us. And I'll get back to them, or my aide will get back to them as quickly as we can. We do receive a lot of emails, so I try to get back as quickly as I can. But I'm available. I go to parades. I do all kinds of things. I have actually a district office located in our music lessons company, so at 46 Village Point Drive in Powell, Ohio. I'm more than happy to meet with constituents there, and try to have some office hours in the county and a couple of locations in the county as well to try to meet with constituents.
Well, that's wonderful, and thank you very much for taking a few minutes out of your day today to meet with us. It's been great talking to you, Representative.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you again on the next edition of Ohio in Focus, the program that brings state government to you. Thank you for joining us.